If you've seen my other videos or live streams, you might have noticed that I've gotten a bit more into F1 lately. Not just watching the races on TV, but also playing the F1 games. Some of you might already know this, but last year's F1 22 game was the first to add VR support. And that VR headset support is how I was able to fit a racing sim in my small office, without the bulk of setting up a monitor and monitor stands. With this setup behind me, I can just scoot into my seat, put on my VR headset, and now I'm racing. Before I started sim racing in VR, I hadn't even thought about upgrading my gaming PC, since it could already pretty much run anything I wanted on a flat screen on high settings thanks to the NVIDIA 3060 I bought last year. But now that I've started VR sim racing, I've realized that the 3060 just doesn't have enough oomph to run F1 in VR. I mean, don't get me wrong, running VR games is difficult because you essentially have to render the game twice, once per each eye. So I don't necessarily blame the 3060. It would be just fine for flat screen F1 games. The 3060 worked to get me started racing in VR on a mix of medium to low settings with some choppy slowdowns here and there. But now that I've been racing for a bit, I've been wanting a bit more power to amp up those settings a bit. So my newly refreshed PC build for mid-2023 is more or less built for the F1 23 game that just came out. Kind of like an engine upgrade for my virtual F1 car. But no doubt, I'll of course enjoy the extra horsepower in my other VR games and even my non-VR games as well. So onto the upgraded build. The purpose of this build was specifically to increase graphics performance. And when it comes to graphics cards, bigger is almost always better. But there's just one problem. I'm a masochist who loves ITX cases. I loved that my SG13 fit right into my cube organizer underneath my desk, giving a clean, stealthy look. So I wanted to continue that if at all possible. Unsurprisingly, the SG13 just can't really fit anything much bigger than a 3060 for its GPU. So I needed to find a case that could both fit a bigger GPU and fit in my cube organizer. Again, unsurprisingly, there aren't very many cases on the market that fit the dimensions of a cube organizer. Conveniently, Silverstone has a new version of the Sugo series called the SG16. The SG16 spec sheet says it can hold a graphics card up to 275mm long and 50mm tall. And as it happens, Asus just released their new 4070 dual twin fan GPU, which just might be the most powerful card that fits these dimensions. And of course I ordered the white finish to match because aesthetic. Going into this, the dimensions were extremely close. I really didn't even know how close these components would fit until I received the parts in the mail and did a test fit. And thank God, these components are such a tight fit, there's maybe a couple millimeters allowing the 4070 to squeeze through the opening here, which again is why I bought this case and graphics card specifically in the first place. But yeah, when you're building ITX, anything can happen. So this case and GPU combo turned out to be a match made in heaven. Everything else in my build is pretty much the same except for the CPU cooler. I took advantage of the extra room in the SG16 to upgrade from a low profile cooler to a dual tower cooler called the ID Cooling SE207 XT Slim. Say that 207 times fast. Again, it just barely fits, which is why I ordered it. But I made sure to mount it to the motherboard first before putting the motherboard in the case, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to fit my hands in the case to actually screw it down or plug in the cables. You just gotta love building in ITX cases, am I right? So we've got an upgraded case, an upgraded GPU, and an upgraded CPU cooler. We're sticking with the same CPU and motherboard, the Ryzen 3600 and Gigabyte Aorus Pro Wi-Fi B450i, partly because it works just fine, but mostly because the new ITX motherboards are pretty pricey at this point in time still, so upgrading to AM5 would require a much bigger investment in the build, where money is better spent on their other components like the GPU. We're keeping the same 32 gig RAM kit that I got a few years back, especially because it's already got the matching white finish as well. And we're keeping the same EVGA SFX 550 watt PSU. Because again, this one works just fine. And the 4070's probably greatest sleeper trait is that its TDP is actually about 200 watts. So not much higher at all than the outgoing 3060. So we should still be good to go with this PSU. The only other changes really to this SG16 over the SG13 is now we have room to add another 120mm fan in the back of the case, which of course we will take advantage of. So we've installed a Noctua slim fan in the back of the case here, but this build is actually going to be a reverse airflow build of what you would typically think. We're actually going to pull air in through the back of the case and exhaust it out the front of the case. What this means is the air is a bit hot on my right knee during the summer, but I imagine it's actually going to be kind of nice come wintertime, like having a little space heater built right into my desk. And when I'm sim racing, I'm not sitting in my office chair anyways, I'm sitting in my racing seat, which is a bit off to the side, so I don't really mind if the hot air is exhausting out the front. So I'm more than happy having a 500 watt space heater under my desk if it means I can rev up the performance of my virtual F1 car. So now that we've got the build sorted out, how does it perform? Well, temps at idle are around mid 40s to mid 50s. These numbers might not be that impressive to you, but the previous SG13 build was typically idling in the mid 60s. So definitely a big improvement there already. And now when gaming, we're looking at high 70s to mid 80s, but I've yet to see it get any hotter than that, which I consider a win because of the much improved performance of the 4070. Previously with the 3060, F1 22 VR would struggle to hit 60 FPS on an optimized mixture of mostly low settings, which wasn't exactly pleasing to look at either. And matters became worse during wet races where the effects worked the GPU even more, causing 45 or less average FPS. But now with the 4070, we are lasered in at 72 FPS at VR ultra high settings across the board in the dry. In the wet, again, there are a whole lot of effects happening, so the FPS dips a little. But these effects are largely unnecessary in VR anyways. So if we lower the settings from VR ultra high across the board to just the VR high preset and turn off ambient occlusion, we are right back to a rock steady 72 FPS in the wet. And I expect once DLSS 3 drops for the new F123 game, that the game will hopefully look even better in VR thanks to things like frame generation. But so far, even without DLSS 3, the Fidelity FX sharpening plus TAA is by far the best graphics option for VR users currently. So now with the new PC build in place, I've been borderline addicted to F123. I'm currently trying to improve my skills enough to turn off all the assists, like braking assist, traction control, racing line, etc. It's just so much more rewarding to know that you're the one actually stopping the car without locking up and catching big slides and such. So we'll get there, but for now, I better get back to practicing. Thanks for watching, and of course, if you have any questions about the new PC build or playing F123 in VR, just let me know in the comments below. Peace.